Hey everybody, Elgin Walker here, eXp Realty, the Elgin and Pilar Walker team. And we're going to talk a little bit today about closing costs. So, closing costs, first of all, are pretty much costs associated with the real estate transaction, and they are costs that are not included, like you say, as part of your loan or part of what you would think of your normal part. Your closing costs are extra, basically, and you have different closing costs based upon whether or not you're the buyer or the seller. One of the things too is that when you have your closing costs, when escrow closes in our area, you are only provided the closing costs that you pay as the buyer, and as a seller, you are only provided the closing costs that you do as a seller, meaning that how much the seller gets at the end of the transaction is not given to the buyer. How much the buyer has, etc., are not given to the seller. Everything is done separately. So let's start with the buyer on closing costs. And now we're not talking about if you've negotiated closing costs with whether the seller is helping you or not. We're just talking about a sum of what your normal closing costs would be. So first of all, your escrow and title. So your escrow cost, both you and the seller pay escrow costs. And the escrow costs to the buyer and the seller are normally the same. Then you both also pay title insurance. Now, the title insurance cost is different. As a buyer, you're paying for title insurance on your name. As the seller, you're paying title insurance on the property. So, what the title company is insuring for the seller is that when the property is transferred over from the buyer to the seller, that there's be no liens, that there will be nothing that comes to the property that the new buyer would assume that the previous owner, the seller, had and somehow wasn't disclosed or wasn't found out or whatever the case may be. The title insurance is to ensure that. Now, from the buyer side, the title insurance is to ensure that when the property is transferred into your name, that you do not have other liens or something against you that then could lien the property, such as, say, maybe you have a tax lien, maybe you have a judgment, maybe you have something like that. Those things normally have to be taken care of before property can be transferred into your name. So that's what your title insurance does. Then, on different sides of the ledger, as far as a seller goes, in most cases, not all cases, but most cases, the seller pays for transfer tax that the property is just transferring it from from the seller's name to the buyer's name, other additional costs like that. As a buyer, your biggest closing cost that you pay beside escrow and title is whatever fees are associated with your loan. So in most cases, you have a loan origination fee. You'll probably have some discount points. All that depends upon the loan that you are looking to get or qualify for. It also, a lot of that stuff depends upon your credit score, and all of that. But those are costs that the buyer would normally pay. Now, as a buyer, there are a couple of costs that you pay up front that are non-refundable. Now, non-refundable it's technically not a closing cost, but you'll still see it sometimes on your sheets. Is your home inspection? If you do a home inspection, that home inspection normally needs to be paid for at the time the inspection's done. An appraisal. Yeah, an appraisal. If you're getting a loan, the majority of the time, not all the time, not all the time. It used to be all the time, but not all the time. A lot of it depends upon the lender and depends upon how much money you're putting down. But the lender wants an appraisal done on the property that the buyer is responsible for. You ask why? Because the lender in most cases is lending most of the money, and they want to make sure that the value of the property is worth what the buyer is willing to pay and the seller is willing to sell for. So that in a nutshell, and you can go back and forth on that. So with your closing costs, these are the main ones. On the seller side, needless to say, the biggest closing costs that you had, and this is changing. So as we speak right now, normally the seller was paying the real estate commission. So you pay the listing agent and you pay the buyer's agent's commission. It appears that is going to change. That appears that the sellers are going to only have to, quote unquote, pay their listing agent, and whatever that fee is, that's negotiable, obviously, and that the buyers are now going to have to pay probably at least something or contract to pay the real estate commission. All of that's going to be worked out. It's coming. There has been a settlement, but that settlement has not been ratified at the time of this recording. So as we speak right now, buyers, the majority of the time, you don't see that on your closing costs. And that's the way it's normally, quote unquote, been split since I've been doing real estate. Now, of course, there's exceptions to that. And it is negotiable. All that good stuff. But that's how it normally looks. So buyers, excluding real estate commission right now, we're talking about we'll take the commission out of the period for buyers and sellers. For buyers, your commissions are normally, your closing costs are normally about 2%, let's just say 2% to 3% of whatever the purchase price is. Sellers, not including what you pay in real estate commission, you're generally somewhere around another 2% as well, because of the and mostly that's because of the transfer taxes. The escrows and the title are really not that expensive in the big scheme of things. I know every dollar you pay is expensive, but that's kind of what your closing costs are. They have nothing to do with your down payment. It has nothing to do with your earnest money. It has nothing to do, sellers, with your net proceeds or any of that. These are just costs that are associated with your real estate transaction. And the description that I give you is how they are customarily taken care of. But I'll tell you one thing, in the real estate game, everything is negotiable. Alrighty? Have questions? Hopefully this provided some information for you, some value. Look forward to helping you and assist you with any of your real estate needs. Take care.